So again, welcome to Pathways That Pay Off: Education, Employers, and Economic Opportunity. Thank you for joining. I'm Elisa Salas, Senior Vice President of Strategy and Operations at the Skill Up Coalition and proud Making Waves Education Foundation board member. Today you're going to hear from our four panelists who can share the perspectives of schools, students, employers, and nonprofits working to bridge the gap from education to career. I'm especially excited to moderate this panel because I have spent my entire career supporting young people in the transition to adulthood, as a classroom teacher, as a principal, nonprofit leader, and now focused on workers and learners at the Skill Up Coalition. And these folks are doing this every single day in very innovative and unique solutions across the continuum of K-12 and higher education. So let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. We have Christine Cruzvergara, Chief Education Strategy Officer at Handshake; Sorby Grant, President and CEO at Climb Higher; Jonathan Johnson, Founder and CEO at Rooted School Foundation; and Patrick O'Donnell, CEO at Making Waves Education Foundation. Welcome again to all of you, and thanks for being here today. So we've prepared a few questions for our panelists, and then we'll also open it up for audience questions. The Q&A is open throughout, so just feel free to drop in a question at your leisure. You also have the ability to upvote, so we can kind of prioritize the hot questions of the moment. So again, we encourage you to participate via chat, so you can adjust your settings if you want to chat with everyone as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So our first question is really intended to kind of welcome folks into the room. So let's go ahead and start by grounding us in each of your work. Can you briefly share how your organization is addressing the gap between education and career? And I'm going to go ahead and start with Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Elisa, and a warm welcome to everyone joining the panel today. As Elisa shared, my name is Jonathan Johnson. I'm founder and CEO of Rooted School Foundation. At Rooted School, we believe schools should provide personal pathways to financial freedom. We do this in two ways. First, our charter schools ensure students graduate with both a college acceptance and a job offer. Second, we have a program called the $50 Study, which gives $50 a week to students throughout the school year to address barriers to deeper academic engagement and for them to learn real financial responsibility. Some of the results we've seen in our work: about 60 to 70% of our students in our schools earn industry recognized credentials a year, largely in IT related fields. Our seniors in New Orleans, as an example, this year graduated with about 520 college credits over the school year in a dual enrollment program with Southern University of New Orleans. And in our study, students made measurable improvements in attendance, and they typically saved about 15% of the $2,000 that they receive in a given year, showing their intentionality around future planning. So really excited about some of the early results we've seen and some of the programming we're doing to improve upward mobility for kids.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan. Patrick, would you mind telling us a little bit more about what y'all do?
Great, sure. Thanks, Lisa. So Making Waves is in Richmond, California, which is in the Bay Area. And for 35 years, we have supported young people from low-income backgrounds on the path to and through college. And we do this through a two-part model. Making Waves Academy is our amazing public charter school. We serve 1,100 middle school and high school students every year. And then at Making Waves Education Foundation, we support Academy graduates all the way through college completion. And we've done this work really well. 95% of our students enroll in college. Almost 2/3 earn a bachelor's degree, and most do it with zero debt. And it's just really amazing to see so many young people that we work with. And in many cases, sometimes like generations of siblings and cousins go through Making Waves and ultimately be the first in their family to graduate from college, and not only changing their own life trajectories, but often then impacting the trajectory of their whole family. So we're really proud of the work that we do and have done. And I would imagine probably, for a lot of folks who are joining on this webinar, people who have organizations and leaders who have really embraced the college for all model and mindset like we have at Making Waves over the years, we recognize that this model is insufficient in today's education and workforce landscape. And what we see for our students, but also in the field, is that nearly half of low-income students who earn a bachelor's degree are underemployed in their first job. And then they ultimately often stay there 5 years out. And so even though they have a bachelor's degree, they're really actually not positioned for economic mobility. We also see, the bachelor's degree path is not one that's working for all students. And there are other pathways. Students can earn, as Jonathan was referencing, industry recognized credentials or take associate's degree programs with, paired with strong work experience, like that can put them on a real strong path to a strong first job. And so we're in this phase now at Making Waves where we're reimagining our model. And so we're exploring actually like what would it look like for us to, in a different way, bridge this gap between education and employment. And what that looks like for us at the foundation, it's interesting. We have this unique model where we have two organizations, and at the foundation, we've kind of been in a mini intermediary organization that's bridged the gap between K-12 and higher ed for our academy students through our college pathway program. And so now we're exploring like what might it look like for us to expand our intermediary capacity for young people across our community by partnering with high schools, higher ed, and employers to build out accelerated and supportive education and career pathways that lead to high demand, high wage jobs. So it's an exciting phase for us to say like, yeah, we've done good work. And if we really want to position young people for economic mobility, we've got to reimagine what the model looks like.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm sure that it resonates with lots of folks on the call, myself included, where the College for All model has been at the forefront of lots of education efforts over the last 20 years. And we're recognizing that while it's super important to hold high expectations and standards for folks, there is more than one standard and expectation, right? And so the idea of becoming much more transparent about those pathways, much more inclusive about those pathways, and then making those connections, right, across the many different sectors is super critical. So thank you. Sorby, over to you.
Yeah, morning or afternoon, everybody. So great to be here. And I feel so fortunate to be a K-12 educator. I mean, you're in it for life. And then to be having these types of conversations on a Tuesday, I feel very special to be a part of this panel and getting to chat with all of you about things that I think about and I'm so passionate about. So at Climb Higher, we're a national equity-focused workforce development nonprofit. We focus on adults who are under and unemployed, earning less than $30,000 a year. And what we do is we blend technical skills in addition to soft skills and social capital development, and opening up various networks and professional networks to our climbers. That's what we call our participants. Our model is cohort-based, really focused on building community and then leveraging that relationship building and community focus that we have to entering new careers and new networks while earning certifications in two fields, IT support as well as digital marketing. And our IT support track is going to be expanding to entry-level cybersecurity in the next year or so. And a few things that make us really unique is that we have a proprietary social capital curriculum where we explicitly teach the ins and outs of how do you build that professional network, from what do you do when you go to a virtual or in-person happy hour to how you have those follow-up conversations in LinkedIn to how you actually make the ask of, hey, can you refer me to this job that I see someone in your network has? And we have that relationship. We also have career navigation support, which looks like interview prep, making sure that folks are really ready to shine and showing the skills that they have. And then the last part of our model is a thriving alumni community. At the end of our program, we don't graduate our climbers. They're actually inducted into our alumni community, and they enter a whole new network akin to networks in colleges, where all of a sudden, because you have the Climb Higher or the Cornell or insert whatever university you went to, you now know that you have a community behind you who is going to help you along the way, may it be negotiating your first job or getting that amazing internship or opportunity down the line. It's a little bit about us.
Thanks, Survey. Climb Higher has really been pioneers in the kind of credentialing and social capital space, and one of Skill Up Coalitions, the organization I now work for, one of our first partners. So deep gratitude for the continued work that you all do. All right, over to you, Christine.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here. At Handshake, we are the largest early career talent network, partnering with over 1,600 universities and colleges across the country to serve their 18 million students and young alumni in getting connected to over 1 million employers on our platform. So the mission at Handshake has always been to democratize opportunity for students. And it was the recognition that while talent is evenly distributed, often opportunities are not. And so the way that many students in the past, many of us on this call back when we were in college, would find opportunities was very narrow. And employers would only recruit at certain schools. And Handshake disrupted that by creating a network and helping many institutions who are not always at the top of many employers' lists to actually get access to those opportunities by making it much easier for employers to actually post those opportunities to many, many schools all at once. And that's allowed for many of our institutions to build deeper relationships with employers that they used to struggle to get face-to-face time with. And that has resulted in millions of students now over the past decade getting jobs, moving to states, and having opportunities that they otherwise would never have seen or would never have been able to apply to or to meet those individuals. And now that we're embarking on this newest chapter at Handshake, which is really to prepare the next generation for the AI economy, we're really starting to think about how do we incorporate those particular skill sets into every single student that's on our platform, because it doesn't matter what industry or what sector you're about to go into. Just like 10 years ago, everybody used to talk about how every industry was going to be the tech industry, and we now have seen that. We're essentially on the precipice of that happening again, with every industry, every sector, every role in some way, shape, or form will also be AI informed. And we need a workforce that is ready for that. And so our next chapter is to help infuse that into the network and the marketplace that we have. So excited for this conversation today.
Thanks, Christine. I reflect a little bit on my own journey at a small liberal arts college, 1,300 students, Hispanic serving institution. There was not a lot of employers on campus that were recruiting for roles right after. And so the idea of a solution that's been able to aggregate employer demand in the space, particularly for underrepresented students, is so critical. So thank you for the work you do and for the perspective that you are bringing to this panel. All right. Next question. We want to focus a little bit on connections. So curious, how can K-12 higher education and employers work together to scale high quality career connected learning? And what does quality look like? I'm going to hand this over to Jonathan, who, if you would also like to define what career connected learning might be for this panel.
Elisa, that's dangerous, but we'll take a stab at it. So the definition of career-connected learning that we use in Rooted World is taken from the Office of Career and Technical and Adult Education at USED. That office defined some key pillars a few years ago for career-connected high schools that, if implemented and integrated effectively and equitably, will better prepare young people for post-secondary education and a rewarding career. So those four keys, or those four pillars, are participating in a comprehensive post-secondary education and career navigation system. So that's component one. Component two is a dual or concurrent enrollment program while students are in high school. Component three is a work-based learning opportunity or internship, preferably paid. And then lastly, in-demand or high-value industry-recognized credentials. And so for us and how we apply that in a career-connected learning high school, I'll just say first, we don't think that there's any one model of what these pathways could or should look like in a school. I very much believe in that there should be waves, no pun intended, uh, with you all, but I think that there should be ways and that there should be different interpretations of how these live. And one example of how we think about it in Rooted is, I think, best illustrated through a student that we've had. His name was Zach. Came to us, very much an average student, but heard a CEO from an additive manufacturing, that's like 3D printing, additive manufacturing company, talk about the work that they were doing and immediately got enthralled. Goes up to the CEO and asks, "Hey, how can I work for you all?" And the CEO says, "Well, because you go to a school that really cares about preparing you for the workforce and not just college, this school offers several industry credentials that you should be taking each year while you're at the school. And there happens to be one credential that's really important to the work that we do at our company. And the credential was facilitated through Autodesk. It was an Autodesk Inventor CAD certification." And he says, "Zach, if you earn this credential, uh, and you do an internship with us, we'll hire you." Zach goes on to earn that industry credential in his sophomore year. Usually, you're not exposed to that until you're in the workforce or you're in college. And so it was a rare thing in the city at that time to get exposed to it. He goes on to get a paid internship in his junior year. They liked him enough. He did well enough where they invited him back for a paid internship in his senior year. And then by the time he crosses the stage with us, he's not only got into a 4-year college, but Zach also got a job offer making a little over $35,000 immediately after high school as a 3D printing specialist for this company that does 3D models for companies like Shell when they're building new factories or refineries. And so for us, that is like the cleanest illustration of what the arc could look like, though it could look like many, many other things. But that for us is what quality could look like.
Thanks, Jonathan, for grounding us in that specific student story and for offering the definition. Well, I think it's important that we have a kind of broad interpretation, right? There's lots of ways that we need to personalize and individualize career-connected learning for students. I think it's also important for this panel and this conversation that we actually offer a level of precision about what we actually mean by career-connected learning. And Autodesk CAD is a very specific credential that I know a lot about in my work, but is often impossible for a guidance counselor to know all of the things that are very specific to every single job and every single employer. And so the example of having that connection, that exposure to a real employer, I think is super, super important. Thank you for sharing. On over to Pat.
Great. And Jonathan, I'll start by sharing. I love a great making waves pun, so appreciate that. And yeah, the definition on career connected learning is so good. And when I think about those different components that you shared, I think one reality is like our current education and workforce system is just not actually designed to like work cohesively across the different systems to build out those experiences for young people. And it reminds me, a couple years ago, I read the Jobs for the Future report, The Big Blur. And I'm so inspired by that report and what they are recommending. And one of the things that really stood out to me is the report says, the biggest structural barrier to economic mobility is like the disconnect between K-12, college, and career. And, I think when I look at the young people that we work with, so many of them, it's like really challenging to navigate the transition points between those three systems. There's, like fragmented pathways and the options aren't always clear. And there are limited opportunities to get like the real world experience, the paid internships that you referenced. And so, like how do we start bringing those things together through career connected learning? I'll share a story. I was talking to one of our current college students about a month ago, and I feel like her story like captures really well the challenge that young people face navigating this system. So she graduated from Making Waves Academy, and when she was in high school, she was super excited to do nursing. And like she chose a nursing program at a 4-year college in California, and she said like, yes, this is my school, this is my path. She gets into that program, and then about a year and a half into it, she realizes like, oh no, actually, nursing isn't fully what I thought it was going to be. This is actually not the right fit for me. And now feel like I'm kind of stuck in this program. She ended up transferring to a community college as sort of like a reset to do some re-exploration, and ultimately discovered like an academic and career path that felt like it was the right fit. And so now she's headed down that path, which is great. But someone said to me earlier this year, and I'll never forget this. They said, college is a really expensive career exploration strategy. But I think the reality is like so many students find themselves in that situation. And so I think we solve for that by, again, like bringing these three, like K-12, higher ed, and employment together to have earlier career connected learning. Jonathan, like you described, I'll share like what is this looking like for us at Making Waves, especially since we've seen our students not get that career connected learning that would have set them up in a different way. We are doing a pilot in the coming year. It's a healthcare pathway pilot. And if it was built out over time, it would serve students across our community in grades 11 through 14. So it's like that critical transition point between like high school and college and career. So for the student that I reference, like what this could look like is she's super excited about nursing in high school. And she's like, I want to go into nursing. She enrolls in our healthcare pathway program in 11th grade. We team up with Kaiser, one of our local hospitals, and she gets to do lots of exploration and real world experiences, meeting with Kaiser professionals to learn about different roles and pathways. She realizes like, oh, actually, maybe nursing's not what I want to do, but there's this radiologic technologist position that I had no idea existed. Like, that's really what I want to do. She does an internship at Kaiser while she's in high school. We're teaming up with the local community college. So she does some early college credit. She takes an anatomy course. She gets her first industry recognized credential and basic life support. Fast forward to end of high school, and she enrolls in a radiologic technologist program. Because of her early college credit, she's already on an accelerated path to an associate's. She graduates with her associates in 18 months. And then she gets a full-time job as a radiologic technologist at Kaiser, strong first salary, no debt, and she's in a totally different position. And I feel like that's what Jonathan, going back to your definition, like of early exposure, paid work experience, that dual enrollment, like if we can put those pieces in place, it can really position students in a different way. But the only way it happens is you've got to get K-12 and higher ed and employers to actually work together to create those opportunities in that sort of ecosystem for students to get on those pathways.
Thanks, Pat. The four-year college pathway is an expensive career exploration. Possibility is definitely resonates at SkillUp. We talk a lot about kind of de-risking the process for folks as they think about what their career pathways are and next credentials. And I think the example that you gave not only allowed or could allow that young person to become a radiological tech without debt. It also allows them to potentially go back for their RN later on because of the skills, right, that they have learned in those pathways. So thinking about kind of the linkages, not only for what we call the gateway job, but also what could also be long-term a destination job. So really appreciate those examples. All right, we are going to switch over a little bit to social capital and start with Sorby, who is our social capital expert. And so we know that social capital is, who you know can be just as important as what you know. And so would love to hear a little bit more from our panelists about what does building social capital look like for Gen Z, including, because of my love for precision, a definition. So Sorby, would you get us started?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to just like I won't, trust me, don't worry, guys. On that last topic, I think it's like so often purpose finding is not extended beyond folks who are able to go to college, and just like the work that Jonathan and Patrick are doing is really inspiring and gets me really excited. So thank you guys. But social capital also gets me really excited. I first started my love of social capital when I was in college and I read Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam, and who knew so many years later, I would now be talking about social capital on a regular basis and totally geeking out about it. So social capital as defined by Robert Putnam, I did have to look this up to go back because I have a shorthand, but I want to give you the official definition, refers to the connections among individuals, social networks, and the norms of reciprocity and trustworthiness that arise from them. There are two types of social capital that he talks about. Bonding social capital, so that's within group ties. Think about your friendships. And then bridging social capital. This is across group ties. And bridging social capital is also specifically the type of social capital that we focus on at Climb Higher. And Raj Chetty, another famous person, talks a lot about this. There's a whole slew of New York Times articles from a few years ago that bridging social capital is the #1 economic determinant for economic mobility, specifically for low-income communities. And so what I say is social capital is the networks, relationships, and connections that open doors to opportunity. And it is just as critical as the technical skills or the credentials that you have. And at Climb Higher, we think of it like, not only do we have a curriculum about it, we intentionally build it, and it's not just a byproduct. It's not an accident. We have many program elements that explicitly build that muscle as to how do you leverage your social capital. I think of social capital as currency. It's money, right? It's the way that you can get things that you dream of, things that you want, and we normalize that within our Climb Higher programming. We teach the art of asking the follow-up question. You know, when you have that like moment when you're meeting with somebody, we teach the art of don't ask close-ended yes or no questions. You ask things that get people talking. You get people communicating and learning interesting things about them. We teach about how to humble brag. Because that's an aspect of building that social capital. And like, you know, always being shy or incredibly humble does not necessarily help you when you're building relationships with strangers. We also teach the value of asking for feedback and how do you loop that into that relationship building work that you're doing, because we all know we love to help one another, but sometimes just asking for that and asking for that feedback is the key to really building that professional relationship. When I think about Gen Z in particular, I think about the impact AI has on everything. I mean, even just to say that statement seems so shallow. But, you know, if you just think about job applications in particular, everything is becoming automated. Everything has to do with AI. So social capital is the differentiator. That connection that you can make can be the differentiator for your application to actually get reviewed, or for you finding out about that information and to getting that leg up. And it's not just doing this for the sake of getting a job, right? There's also an epidemic of isolation that's happening. Like a lot of folks are talking about it. I'm not saying anything unique or new, but folks are lonely now. And the ability for you to build those authentic relationships with people, may it be in the coffee line, may it be when you're at the library, may it be when you're about to go to whatever it is that you're doing, is really it can be really powerful. And it goes back to some of those definitions that I think about with Robert Putnam. Like, we're not even bowling anymore. Like, we're not even bowling alone. Like, we're playing Candy Crush by ourselves. And like, or we're talking to AI about things that we used to talk to one another about. So when I think about how social capital can really be the differentiator in supporting Gen Z, it's like, what are the ways that we build those authentic relationships in a world that relationships seem to be dwindling, or relationships with one another are dwindling? And how can we support one another just in life, but also in employment?
Thanks, Sorby. I so appreciate social capital as currency. At SkillUp, we spend so much time on identifying what are the technical skills, the technical credentials that one needs in order to break into gateway roles. And we wholly recognize that it's insufficient to be able to land that next job. That social capital, which has a little bit of mystery behind it. It's not something that you can completely dissect in all the ways, but I also appreciate how you have named what those skills are in creating social capital for your students. So thank you for sharing that with us. Christine, would love to hear how Handshake is thinking about social capital and connections.
Yeah, and actually I'll build off of where Sorby left off, which is I think it's super important for everybody on this call to recognize that technology is here to help enable access. It does not replace what actually still has to be done by humans. And I think that's a really important piece. And as someone who works in a tech company, I feel and believe that wholeheartedly. Like, tech will never completely replace people, and it shouldn't, but it can augment and it can provide access. So when we think about it in the social capital arena, think about the fact that any given college age student right now, technically, let's take Handshake, could get connected to somebody else at another institution that has a similar interest to them or has a similar major or maybe wants to go into an industry that they want to pursue. When we were all in school, that wasn't possible. It wasn't possible to easily access a whole network of people that I could connect with that maybe wanted to do something similar to what I wanted to do. My network was really sort of closed off to either people at my alma mater, within my community, people that my parents knew, or my high school, right? Like, that was pretty much the breadth of how wide I could go. And that's not true anymore. Because of technology, students now have access to greater circles, which is fantastic. However, that has meant that Gen Z deeply cares about actually human interactions. They probably care even more than we give them credit for. And we hear it all the time at Handshake. The students want real human interactions. They want to use technology to like initially connect and find you, but then they want to make sure that those connections are human and real and authentic. And I think the authenticity part is another piece that I would just say is incredibly important to Gen Z. They do not want blanket answers. They want personalized answers. They want real advice. They want to hear the good, the bad, the dirty. Like, they want all of it. And to them, that feels authentic, that feels real. So for all of the people on the call right now that work with Gen Z, that work with students, knowing how to communicate with them in those short, bite-sized ways that also have very real advice is something that's really critical to actually making sure that they're hearing what it is you're saying. At Handshake, we decided to actually create a feed. It was based on student feedback. They were like, we're part of this network with so many other students from other schools. We would love a way to actually be able to interact with them. And not just through people search. So we have people search where they can actually search for folks that have interests or areas that they're interested in. But they wanted to do it in a more organic fashion that they're used to. And so the feed is very similar to other feed type posts that you would see on other platforms. But they find that that is a great organic way to actually connect with somebody, because maybe Sorby just posted a video about how hard it was to get an internship interview and she's feeling kind of discouraged. This is like real life, not actually Sorby, but real life. Lots of students have posted that. And in the chat are all of these encouraging messages from people that they don't even know, from other schools, right? And it helps them to feel not alone. It helps them to feel like they have a community. And there have been countless stories of students saying that that's how they ended up meeting each other. They commented on each other's posts. They then sent a DM. They then realized they had some shared interests or they had advice that they could give to each other. And that's continued. And so I think those are the types of moments that we're trying to use technology to create those more human interactions down the road. So it's exciting to sort of see what that can be. And I would also say, I know that there are a few institutions, higher education institutions here, a few career center folks that are our partners. And what I would also say from that standpoint is there's been a long-standing tradition in career services, and I came from that world for more than a decade, where there was sort of this mantra of like, we don't want to give the students the fish, we want to teach them how to fish, right? And so when it came to social capital, there was almost this belief that like, I shouldn't be making a warm intro to someone. I should just teach them how to search a database. I should teach them how to write the email. I should teach them how to make the approach, but I shouldn't actually facilitate the introduction. And I would say that in this day and age, that has shifted. And I think with that, we need to shift our approach. You are actually not just giving them a fish, you are teaching them how to fish by facilitating a warm intro to an alum or to an employer or to someone that you have a relationship with, because you are now seeing your value prop is to be an extension of their network. And in the real world, the way that we make introductions and the way that we build networks is to make a warm introduction. So you are actually modeling that behavior for them. And I know that that's hard at some schools to have the bandwidth to be able to do that, but I do think it's an important question for us to really ask ourselves, what is our value proposition? Why would a student want to use us or see us or come to us for support? And how do we rethink the services or interventions we have to find the bandwidth to do the things that might be most meaningful?
Thanks, Christine, particularly for the example of technology being able to amplify authenticity and community and expand networks. I also appreciate just the reminder that as folks that work with young people, that we are also part of that social capital, right? So that reminder that that warm introduction is actually part of the work, recognizing that there's not always time to do it. So prioritizing it is exactly the right thing. All right. We are going to move on over to a discussion about credentials, and then we will open up to the audience for questions. So my question for the panel, we'll start out with Christine, is how can we ensure that credentials, whether degrees, certificates, or skill badges, are meaningful to both students and employers? So Christine?
Sure. So sitting at the intersection of institutions, students, and employers, this topic comes up all the time. And my broad sort of statement would be what we are seeing is that employers are becoming more and more accepting of other forms of education outside of the traditional just 2-year and 4-year sort of space. That's fantastic on a lot of levels. I will also say I am still probably the strongest advocate for higher education. I still believe that it's an incredible experience, but I do recognize that it's not necessarily the right choice for every single student. And I think it's wonderful that employers are starting to become more flexible in the types of credentials or certificates that they might be willing to look at. The big buzzword, of course, is skills-based hiring. Right. And so you have a lot of employers that are starting to think about what are the competencies or what are the skills that you actually need. My biggest critique on that is that a lot of employers still don't actually have the operational rigor to put that in practice. So it's like a fun thing to talk about, but I don't know a lot of employers that are actually doing that well at scale. And so I think it's still a work in progress to sort of get there. I think when it comes to badges, or actually let's pause on the badge conversation for a hot second. I know a lot of higher education institutions that are spending time trying to create unique badges for their institution. And it's maybe a badge on communication or a badge on teamwork or a badge on wellness or a badge on whatever, fill in the blank. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Every employer that I talk to, they do not care about that unique badge that you've created for your institution. And so my advice to schools, and I used to work at a school that also spent time trying to do this more than a decade ago. My advice would be use your time in other ways that can be much more valuable. Because the reality is, unless the badge is actually grounded in an industry recognized credential, most employers don't actually care. They're not taking a whole lot of credence out of that particular badge. So if you're using that badge to help students learn how to articulate their skills, and you're using it as a way for them to know how to talk about it, how to interview better, by all means, that's a great learning and developmental tool, but don't use it because you think that just having that badge is going to somehow get employers to look at your students differently. So I think you have to be really clear about your intention around that piece of it. When it comes to certificates and other credentials, we're still finding that, quite frankly, employers still generally have kind of like a proxy of what is considered a valuable credential or a valuable certificate. And it is typically still sort of like brand name. Do I know it? Do I recognize it? Do I trust it? Right? All of those pieces are still playing a very big role. So even though there's more flexibility, more acceptance, some of the same dynamics are still at play with that. And that's what we're seeing.
Thanks, Christine. I think the spirit, right, the reminder is that it is a quality credential if it is in fact going to be recognized by the employer, right, as being quality. At the end of the day, we want folks to be able to get that job and land their pathway towards economic mobility. Jonathan, over to you to talk a little bit more about your perspective at Rooted.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Christine shared. I have seen a lot of that play out with our schools being a bridge for our students to the world of work. Just a couple of additional thoughts. I agree with Christine on the importance of having some sort of post-secondary credential as just like one source to reference. Georgetown University Center for Education and Workforce um, uh, put some research out a couple of years ago around a post-secondary credential being required to access about 80% of what they described as a good job, which was a job paying workers 35,000 or more in at the ages of 25 to 44. And so all of that to say the post-secondary credential is really, really important. That doesn't necessarily mean four-year college degree, though, or that kids have to. It just means they have a higher likelihood of landing the good job with that. Um, the other thing um, that is coming up for me as I'm hearing the conversation um, is the to just tie the loose end with the importance of tying the loose end of like what it means for an employer to recognize a credential. Strongly recommend for any of our practitioners in the room that there is some binding agreement attached to that with employers. That can look like an MOU, that can look like um, a number of things, but it's not enough for a verbal, oh, this is what we do at our company, or this is what will get the kid hired. There needs to be some validation, some certainty legally that if a student does earn this credential or does go down this path, that there is a commitment to hiring, or that can land the kid the job. Again, it's not always easy to do in every use case, but from a programmatic standpoint for schools that are compliant to states and to local school districts, it's critical. It's critically important. And then the last thing I would say from a credential standpoint is something that we've been reluctant to do in the U.S. but that is like apprenticeship-based models going earlier into a young person's educational career. We've seen different institutions do this in varying levels of success. One successful example that comes to mind for me is the work that Reach University does with teacher apprenticeships across multiple states in the U.S. Um, where there is that binding commitment between the university as the provider of that curriculum and that credential, the employer who is going to pay the university to train that individual and then ultimately hire them, and then certainly the commitment from that student who is enrolled. There is no reason why a similar framework or structure could translate itself into the 9/12 experience at the very least. And I think that could go a long way in providing the certainty around a credential's validity that may be missed from a lot of standardized career-connected learning programming in our schools.
Thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate the point on a formal partnership and kind of employers as certifiers that the particular credential is in fact recognized. I am both moved and excited about a lot of the some new work-based accountability with credentials in the K-12 space being offered, but also a little suspect that they're kind of certificate factories that don't have a lot of meaning and value. And so those formal partnerships, I think, are particularly important. And then the reminder that any kind of hands-on in the workspace experience that is actually coupled with a certificate is only going to make the candidate that much more stronger. Sorby, would love to hear a little bit about how you think about credentials.
Yeah, on a regular basis, when I'm talking to new climbers who are participants, and they're like, I'm just here for the cert. Like, I'm really Like the reason why I love the program, that it's free and I can get like my CompTIA A+ cert because I can't get it on my own. And usually at that point, I'm like, all right, we gotta talk. Like a cert is just proof that you can take a test. And in fact, there are many employers that while the CompTIA A+, this is the cert that you get for part of the IT support program, is like incredibly valuable, right? Because it's on every single job description. Deleted bachelor's required, now it's CompTIA A+. If you are unable to articulate how you use that information and how that will be a value add, it will not be of service. So you can say, I'm just going to come to our technical cohort classes and I'm going to use my absences on to answer the tell me about yourself question, or to the end of our work-based learning at Capstone, where we ask climbers to really articulate what they learned. You are doing yourself a disservice and you won't actually get the expedited employment that you think you are going to get. Because, certs, one day we will have a panel where we might be saying no certs required, right? Instead of like no degree required, because it's really about how you articulate and show, not tell, what you know. That's actually one of the sessions that we have. It's showing, not telling, about all of your experiences. So when you've done your work-based learning, when you've done your internships, when you've done your projects or community service that's related to the cert that we have in our program, we always go back to, okay, how are you going to incorporate this in your interview questions? How are you going to show the hiring manager? How are you going to articulate this on LinkedIn of what you learned? Not just, I got this new badge, but here's what I learned and here's now what I can do and the value add that I am to your institution, to your organization. So I think that's like really key, especially as Christine was sharing and reflecting on skills-based hiring. The real winner here is how you articulate what you know and what you're able to do for your employer. And the other thing I would say around credentialing for and making it meaningful for our participants is, what are the ways that you are thinking about their progression along their career trajectory? How is it that you are giving them an initial credential that they can stack, or an initial credential that they can like learn and experience the initial thing? I think about our digital marketing track, and we do entry level digital marketing, because when you get into the digital marketing world and the marketing sphere, there are so many directions that you can go. You can go the creative, you can go the data analytics, but what we give them is a really strong foundation of SEO, of paid search marketing. So then they can build on as to wherever their interests are, but they have something in the door. So what's the way that you're giving something that can be stackable and carried with them throughout their entire career? But the one thing I gotta say is be able to show what you can do, even if you don't pass that test. Being able to say, here are the skills and the things that are inside of this credential and that I now can do because of my experiences, is like the number one differentiator to make it really useful for climbers and participants.
Appreciate that, Storby. I think the reminder that often the cert is kind of the gate that allows you to be eligible for a particular role, but that it's how you talk about it, it's the experience, it's the connections, the tangible kind of essence of what you've learned that is really going to be able to land that job, and making that work-based learning, even that much more important. Okay, so we have a few minutes for some questions. And I'm going to go over to, let's talk a little bit about durable skills. So, oftentimes these are referred to as soft skills, where they're kind of on this journey to rebrand them as not soft, but essential and enduring durable skills like communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. They're increasingly more in demand. How do we teach and value these across different systems?
I can share some thoughts here. I definitely think, when in talking to employers about what they value most in their employees, they are really looking for these durable skills. Like they want to know that the folks that they're hiring are strong collaborators and communicators and have strong problem solving, et cetera. And I'm also thinking, Christine, you referenced earlier, how do we prepare young people for the workforce in the age of AI? And one of the things that I keep reading about is how AI is disrupting the workforce, especially in a number of industries or sectors, eliminating that first rung of the career ladder, like the entry level job. And so now it was already urgent that we are preparing young people for a strong first job. And now we really have to help them make the leap to that next rung. And I think durable skills become really important. I'll just, in terms of teaching them, I'll just give a shout out to an organization that is really inspiring me and our team in terms of how we're learning about durable skills. It's a nonprofit called Next Prep in St. Louis. And what they did, they do a number of things around education and career pathways, but durable skills is a big part of their model. And I got to go out and visit them last year. They worked with their employer partners to say like, hey, what are the top 12 durable skills that you are really valuing and hiring for? They took those 12, and then with the high school students that they work with, students get to practice those skills in simulations. And I got to participate in one of these. And so the durable skill of the day when I was there was active listening and receiving constructive feedback. So I was an actor who was playing a student's manager in their internship, and I got to deliver constructive feedback in terms of how they were doing in their internship. And then the student was using a framework that Next Prep had developed for how to like hear the feedback, repeat back what they were hearing, and then say what they were going to do next, essentially to implement that feedback moving forward. Meanwhile, the other students in the program were in a room watching this on video, like scoring on the rubric, and then had a conversation about the feedback later together. I thought it was just so amazing because I think some of these skills, like receiving constructive feedback, like nobody teaches that. It's sort of just expected that you're going to like somehow through osmosis learn that along the way in your career journey. And so I just thought that was a really cool, very concrete example of like, how do you teach young people these skills so they have the practice and the reps that really position them to be really competent in what employers are ultimately then hiring for?
Thanks, Pat. Another organization for folks to look to is also America Succeeds. If you all haven't heard them as well, they have a public framework that's been validated through the Burning Glass Institute and employers of the top durable skills, in addition to having actually a rubric for how a young person might assess and how a teacher might teach. Well done there. I'm seeing that the digital portfolio question has been answered in the chat. And I'm also recognizing that there's only a few minutes for our last question. So I'm actually going to round us out and move us on. Appreciate everyone for participating in the chat. So our last question is, let's see. If you had to invest in just one change to close the education to career gap, excuse me, what would it be? And I'm going to go ahead and start out how we started at the beginning with Jonathan.
Thank you, Elisa. Going to pivot a little slightly away from the brass tacks of running the school and just say I would invest in a program like the $50 study that gives money to kids. I think it's a massively looked and overlooked opportunity of giving money to kids while they're in school, teaching them not only the importance of financial literacy and capability, but I think is a significant aid to bridging them into what early financial success can look like when they are young adults and start receiving money on the job.
Appreciate that. Stakes are much higher. None of us work for free, right? So appreciate the kind of setting that example early and often. All right, Pat, over to you.
So at the beginning, I mentioned how Making Waves is exploring becoming this pathways intermediary in our community. So maybe my answer is a little bit self-serving on this front, but I think that one of the most important investments is in intermediaries. And I think a lot of what we're talking about is like, how do you reimagine this system across K-12, higher ed, and industry? And if you're really going to if you want to create this like system level solution, then there needs to be investments that are gonna then ultimately impact and change how the system operates. And intermediaries, do a lot of different things. They could do program delivery, they could do policy work that breaks down barriers for young people in terms of economic mobility. They can direct funding. There's lots of flavors of what intermediaries do, but I do think they are an essential component of building the capacity that breaks down the silos of these three systems.
Thanks, Pat. Sorby, over to you.
I was like kind of dreading this question. I was hoping we'd run out of time because I was like, if I had just one,
Just one thing.
I think like for me, there's something around building the relation, like creating a really structured way to build the relationships between talent or job seekers and employers. I think there are like for so many reasons around why like social it's so challenging for that social connectedness between job seekers and employers, low income folks and higher income folks. And if there's a way that we could invest in really structured pathways, so things like essentially all the things that my program does, just invest in. No, I'm just playing. But I think about what are ways to both get some systems change. So thinking about people valuing it and then creating more opportunities for it to happen easily so that there can just be a democratizing of who finds out about those informations, who gets the sponsorships, who gets the ideas, who gets the relationship change that can really make build thriving careers for folks.
Thanks, Sophie. And wrapping us up, Christine.
So I'll answer this actually from the perspective of being a parent. I would love to see earlier exposure to careers, to financial literacy, to how to be an entrepreneur. I think there's so much around simply opening up the aperture. Students can only aspire to what they see, what they know, what they've heard of, and there are literally thousands of jobs. Now, I'm not saying you need to overwhelm a poor K-6 student with all of that information, but early exposure that allows them to build and actually stack those skills and that knowledge is super powerful. And I look at my own son who's 12, who's in middle school, and I learned that this past year in 6th grade, he was enterprising in deciding to sell Jolly Ranchers to friends for a little profit. And he had initially started with trying to sell bags of chips, but discovered you can't sell individual chips. You have to sell the whole bag. And so he opted for candy, which was individually wrapped, right? And so, but it's like little things like that schools could actually be encouraging. Like you see a student that's kind of interested in that sort of thing, and you think about, okay, how can you weave this into a math class? How do you weave this into understanding economics of supply and demand? Like there's so much that you can take in everyday interactions that happen in a K-12 setting, and you can turn that into curriculum. You can turn that into a lesson. You can turn that into exposure, so that students are better able to understand what's out there for them and what's possible. And I think that earlier exposure could be game changing.
Thanks, Christine. I appreciate making it personal as parents on this call. And also, again, the connection back to the role and importance of intermediaries to support schools to kind of do that connecting and making that happen, knowing that schools have a lot to do already. And of course, how important that is, particularly for our young people who are growing up in less advantaged homes where you can only see what is in front of you, right? And so if you don't actually have that exposure and those opportunities, the types of experiences I'm going to provide for my son as a college graduate and professional are quite different than the types of experiences that my parents were able to provide for me. And so super, super important for that reminder. Well, friends, we are at time with 2 minutes to spare. So again, just a lot of gratitude for our panelists on the call. Thank you so much for joining us, and for all of the participants on the call. Making Waves will be hosting more panels this year, so we have a very short feedback survey in the chat. So please share any feedback with us and your thoughts about what you'd like to hear more about in the future. Appreciate everyone's time. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.